first episode of Current Campus Context, brought to you by Student Affairs Now, the online learning community for thousands of us who work in, alongside, and adjacent to higher education and student affairs. I'm your host, Heather Shea, and this episode was recorded at 5:15 p.m. on Thursday, March 6th. Things might have changed by the time you listen. This new limited series is all about making sense of the moment we're in. Higher ed is facing rapid change, and each week we will bring two experts to break down what's happening, why it matters, and what we can do within our spheres of influence. Our goal, not just provide the news, but context, perspective, and strategies for action. So I'm so excited to introduce our first two correspondents for today. First, Dr. Brendan Cantwell is an expert in higher education policy, governance, and the political economy of higher education. He is a professor of higher adult and lifelong education at Michigan State University. Hi, Brendan.
Hey, great to be here.
And Dr. OiYan Poon is an expert in the racial politics of education access, college admission systems, and Asian Americans in education. She is a co-director of the College Admissions Futures Collaborative and consultant on higher education equity to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's education team. Hello, welcome.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. So this week, we're focusing on a few key developments with some significant implications for higher ed. The first item, earlier this week, Linda McMahon, immediately after being sworn in as Secretary of Education, issued her first statement about the department's final mission, pretty ominous sounding statement. And I think we expect, it hasn't dropped as of the recording yet, an executive order charging McMahon with dismantling the Department of Education, even though we know that officially abolishing it would require an act of Congress. But this leaves me with questions about TRIO programs, Pell Grants, FAFSA. So that's topic number one. Topic number two, February 14th, Dear Colleague letter, and then the subsequent FAQ document, which I think was meant to provide some clarification, but for me made it more hazy in terms of what, if anything, we should be doing. And then meanwhile, the Chronicle of Higher Ed has been reporting that many campuses are taking anticipatory measures to comply. So that's topic two. And then the third topic, well, I don't want to bring in every single social media post. Earlier this week, Inside Higher Ed reported that the president doubled down on social media, posting that college and universities that allow illegal protests would be at risk of losing federal funding. I'm thinking this maybe flies in the face of free speech. Maybe. So I think it goes without saying that these three issues will all shape the future of higher education in the coming months, maybe years. And so I'm going to turn it to you, Brendan. What does this all mean? Given what I've just shared, where would you like to begin? And what do you see as the broader implications of these issues for colleges, universities, and the field of student affairs?
Well, it means potentially a lot because the broadside attack on higher education that's coming from the Trump administration is sort of multi-pronged. It's happening on many fronts, and it covers almost every aspect of what we do in higher education. It's pretty terrifying, it's chaotic, and it's really hard to understand what's happening, when it's happening, and what it means for you. Um, but I think we can sort of categorize what's going on in those 3 points that you just identified as like three key developments that have happened in a couple of ways. First, there's the move fast and break things mode that Doge is implementing, and they're trying to dismantle many aspects of the federal government's ability to administer programs and policies that have been passed by Congress and appropriated, right, by Congress. And that can lead to either short or long-term disruptions of vital federal funding. So if there is an executive order to start to dismantle the Department of Education, and they move parts of the department's mission out of education and into other parts of the federal government, we could see things break. We could see financial aid break. And I think it's legitimate to be concerned that financial aid payments on time could be disrupted. right? And that would
Mhm.
be devastating for students and for institutions.
Yeah.
Then there's another category of things, and those are the sort of real things that could happen, the material, the money stuff, right?
Mhm.
Then there's the like, we're going to say that if you do anything that acknowledges the differences between people based on race, gender, national origin, religion, whatever, that it's illegal. And what does
Mhm.
that mean? Does that mean you can't teach about racism? Does that mean you can't teach a course about American history? Does that mean, you know, that you can't acknowledge the existence of trans people? Um,
Mhm.
and most of that is illegal. The federal
Mhm.
government is unable to legally enforce that. They will try to by investigating and I don't think it's too strong a word to say terrorizing individual institutions in
Mhm.
order to probe what they can get away with, what they can enforce, and as you mentioned, to prompt anticipatory compliance. And so there's that level of sort of psychological violence
Mhm.
that's happening. Um, and then the sort of uh, third thing is like, how does your campus respond, and
Right.
where does that put put you, right? So a lot of what the federal government is doing is trying to provoke a reaction on your campus,
Mhm.
and and from you and from your colleagues and from the leaders on your campus. And so that's the way I kind of try to sort out what's going on, even when
Mhm.
all of the details are changing really fast and hard to keep up with.
Yeah, Oyan, what would you add? I think that is definitely a tactic, right? It's making it too quick, too fast to keep up, and that velocity is really confusing too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brendan, for doing that because I was like, I have no idea how you're gonna kick us
We're gonna
off.
frame
So
all these three things.
I know. Thank you for modeling and offering that analysis. I think, the only thing I would add is we've known all of this was coming,
Mhm.
right? Last year I was a fellow at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Thurgood Marshall Institute, and we wrote an analysis on Project 2025 and offered that analysis. I wrote the education chapter. The ACLU did one, Lawyers Committee did one, right? Every single public interest organization out there still has on the interwebs, right? Their own um, analyses, right? Shorts, the briefs, right, on what was coming. And as Brendan, you said, it's all about the money part of it. I think the only money part that we haven't really explicitly named is loan forgiveness, student loan
Mhm.
forgiveness. I would just add that part to it because in the Project 2025 document, it was very clear they want to end all of that. And they want to extract as much money from everyone. And when I was a student affairs professional, I had student loan debt, right? This is
Yeah.
not a profession we make a whole lot of money from after going through advanced degree training. Um, so that is something, and I think I that's the piece that is just an additional piece, right? We've mentioned Pell, we've mentioned TRIO, we've mentioned SSS grants, all these federal things, breaking everything. I think when in this chaos, the implications, I want to move us back into a space of action.
Mhm.
And, I'm just going to thank Brendan again for reminding us in the pre-conversation to this recording that we need to get really good on campus at building relationships and organizing again, right? So
Mhm.
while our leaders, right, the folks in the senior leadership on our campuses are responding and acting and doing their own risk analysis and decision making processes, they need to hear from the staff. They need to hear
Yep.
from students, right? I remember working in student affairs with students who were protesting the war 20 years ago, 25 years ago, right? And what is the role
Mhm.
of student affairs leaders and on the ground professionals in supporting students, right? But then also caring for yourself and making sure that you
Yeah.
are sustaining yourself. And none of this is individual. You have to do this in collectives, right? I think too often in American culture writ large, we think in individual terms,
Mhm.
right? So when you go and talk to your president, don't do it alone. Do it strategically and collectively and learn together from others in deciding how you approach the work. And at the same time, to do that is to build communities as foundational to the learning and to the figuring out of the strategy.
Yeah.
And to support each other, right? And to keep each other healthy.
Yeah, I really appreciate you moving towards the kind of the action steps and what we can do to kind of create that sense of solidarity between and among different communities. And I keep going back to the way that a lot of our like student leadership models have really moved towards this collective perspective. It's not as much about a hierarchy or as much about a positional leader. It's about working together to accomplish things for the common good. And so can we pull back the social change model of leadership and think about that within this context? Brendan, what else would you add as far as recommended actions for what we should do in this moment within our spheres of influence, given that, at least for me, I'm a mid-level manager on a really big campus, and I feel like I don't have a lot of power, but maybe in collectives I do, or maybe with associations. So
Yeah, so I guess one point would be to develop a framework for yourself for understanding where threats are coming from, um, who's responsible for that threat, and where there are sources of resistance or protection from that threat. Because I think what's happening is so intense and it can make all of us feel alone
yeah.
and scared. And it could lead us to not really think things through. And so I think one thing that folks should do is talk with each other. Make sense of what, it's pretty simple, obvious, and I'm sure that most people are doing it, but also talk with your supervisor. Ask your supervisor if it's possible to have sort of conversations with senior leaders. And if the communication that's coming from your university, your college or university doesn't feel like it's helpful for you for making sense of what's going on and what's going to happen at your institution, um, work to create those channels of communication yourself. And I think that kind of less formal, internal conversation can build and help to build trust and also help to inform decision makers about the perspectives and the work that people are doing on campus and the need to ensure that it continues. My view is that kind of work is more important than the sort of external facing. Like I really want my campus president to come out and say DEI is super important. And of course, that would be great if all campus presidents did that, and some are, some have been this whole time. OiYan pointed out that there are some states where this is happening and may be able to share a little bit more about that. But I would look to see at the kind of what's happening in the way the institution speaks. Are websites changing?
Mm-hmm.
Are program names changing? Are people
Yeah.
losing their jobs? Are you being told not to teach certain things or to run certain programs? And that would be what I would sort of would provoke a lot of concern for me and tell me that now's the time to push back and really push on my leader. If my campus executives were not changing things, even if you thought things before weren't ideal, but they weren't changing things, they were continuing to support the work that was going on, but just not really being super vocal about it. I would read that as actually a fairly supportive campus in this environment. And work with your colleagues to make sense of what is actually happening here. Are we in a supportive place? Can we talk about this internally rather than looking to these like I want a big statement kind of signals? Yeah.
Yeah, statements only go so far. And so I would even actually add to the what else you can do is what I'm seeing on the ground in Illinois at some of these institutions that are starting to restructure quietly, let go of people quietly, scrub websites quietly, right? But being reported on through the media is on those campuses, tenured faculty are coming out to connect with the student affairs professionals they're doing in home, like at their homes, house kind of potlucks and teach-ins
Wow.
amongst themselves, right? So that's what I mean tangibly when I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
building community. And they're doing kind of collective study of things like, what is shared governance on our campus look like? Is that a pathway, right? So tracing and mapping out the lines of power and levers, right? So the statements are important. So the 9 public university presidents in Massachusetts, well, this is all within the last 24 hours, right? Like they issued a statement collectively, like we still believe in these things. In the last 24 hours or 12 hours, I don't know. 15 states attorneys general, such as Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, California, and several more, came together and put out a statement to remind higher ed institutions in their states, hey, the threat of an executive order, dear colleague letter that is just meant to strike fear, if you act on that in such a way that is exclusionary and discriminatory, we're watching you too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so these are levers of power, but we cannot wait for senior leadership to make action, right? That's great. These states, these very blue states are doing these things, right? But we also have to remind ourselves that we have power on the ground in our communities and collectives as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like those public statements of solidarity and resistance, right? And seeing that happening in other places might embolden or give some other, institutions and collectives in other states maybe a little bit of that. And obeying in advance and anticipating, what might be happening. I think at the end of the day, and we'll post a bunch of things in the show notes for this episode, but at the end of the day, a dear colleague letter is not law. It's not a statute. And if you are obeying or complying in advance of that, any directive that actually has legal teeth, the law is the Students for Fair Admissions in Harvard. The law is Title VI. Those are the things that we should be paying attention to. So if we were in compliance of those before February 14th, technically we're still operating within a legal framework today.
And we still have to address discrimination where it is, right?
Right.
And that's what the law says.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we are intending for these episodes to be short, quick, snippets of news for folks. And so I do want to give each of you some time to give final thoughts. Like, what do you see on the horizon? What's keeping you up at night? And then what are you pondering, thinking about? What's giving you hope and joy maybe now? And OiYan, why don't I start with you?
I'm going to start with what's bringing me joy.
There you go.
Because it's too easy to spiral into the depths of all of this, right? And I think what's bringing me joy is I've been, some friends and I have been organizing kind of local monthly potlucks, and we're just getting together. We're not all higher ed folks, and it's just kind of just a touch point. Our kids get to play together. I don't have to think about dinner that night, right? And just being with each other and playing games and whatever. And just working out, I guess, is still bringing me a lot of joy. What's on the horizon is we have to sustain ourselves because this is not letting up anytime soon. And, oftentimes people are like, oh, it's going to be a very long 4 years. And I'm like, no. This is much longer than 4 years, especially if everything's broken. And it's been ongoing, right? Don't forget that January 20th, 2025 was not the start of this mess and disaster, right? And so we have to build our muscle for the long haul and the connective tissue and muscle memory and practice to act together. Because a lot more is coming, having had to read the education chapter and other parts of Project 2025. There's a lot more coming, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Folks haven't read that. I think it does.
Oh, no, don't read that. Read everyone else's analyses. I do not
Analysis.
recommend
Okay.
read the analyses because, we're talking about keeping up our mental health here, right?
This is true. This is true. Do not read it.
Don't. Woo, it is, unless you really want to engage in some suffering, go for it.
Yeah.
It's also badly written.
It
It's
is.
awful. They can't write. I'm
No.
sorry.
And
Oh my
and it's poorly
God.
organized, and like proposals are split across different sections, and you have to do a lot of detective work. Not only will you feel horrible about what's being proposed, and much of which is being enacted in one way or another, but it also takes a lot of mental space to try and figure out what are these people talking about.
Yes, if you're gonna read so much other stuff. That's the other thing bringing me joy. I'm reading a lot of smutty romance these days. Highly recommend.
Um,
I love it.
the thing that keeps me up and that has me worried is the settling into a new state of what I've been writing with my colleague Barrett Taylor about post-liberal governance. So that higher education increasingly is directed by state and federal governments with compliance of university leaders in a way that achieves political power for uh, what would right now be the sort of far right version of the Republican Party.
Mhm.
And that leaves higher education in a much diminished state as a sector, so that it would be smaller, it would serve fewer students, it would do fewer good things, and that it would have many fewer possibilities to engender critical thinking and identity development and launching people into agentic lives, and that it would do less things like scientific discovery that expands what we know about the world and may, in many cases, lead to tangible benefits, in medicine or in other places. So I really do worry that this is a moment where higher education faces lasting transformation in a way that is not good. And
Mhm.
so that's what keeps me uh, worried. I think this is going to sound strange, but I think the thing that brings me the most hope, I'm not sure that I experience a lot of joy. I need to work on that. I should probably see somebody.
Smutty romance, Brendan.
Smutty romance. I don't know if that's going to work for me, but a basketball game
Oh,
might.
yes.
Basketball game. There you
A
go.
beer and a basketball game.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh, is people for a long time, sort of very serious people have been sort of willfully ignorant about the threats that are facing higher education and facing our, a multicultural democracy.
Yeah.
And those people are, most people are no longer in that place of kind of
Mm-hmm.
being in very serious denial. And that brings me hope, um, because I think that there is a possibility to mobilize action in a way that even if tremendous damage happens and it lasts for a long time, there will be a point, whether it's in 4 years, whether it's in a decade, where we can start to rebuild. And I was talking to a colleague and said, what can we do? And I said, we can survive to be around to rebuild. And that doesn't sound hopeful, but it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I'm going to send my deepest appreciation for the two of you for joining me for this first episode of a series that will hopefully continue on, and we will be here each week to bring the news to folks. So thank you both, Brendan and OiYan, for sharing your insights in space. We will continue and be back next week. If you are tuning in today and haven't already subscribed to Student Affairs Now's weekly newsletter, please take a moment to enter your email on our website at www.studentaffairsnow.com. You can stay in the loop with all the latest episodes delivered straight to your inbox. And if you have feedback, feel free to email us at host@studentaffairsnow.com or find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Blue Sky. And I really appreciate everybody who's watching and listening today to Current Compass Context, brought to you by Student Affairs Now. We will see you next week. Thanks again.